Seems like we are live. Um, but I'd like to wait just a little bit because Councilman Micton is the star of the night. So let's see if he shows up. Um, so let's wait a couple more minutes.
Goes wherever bugs do. Working 24/7 using blue and light to attract insects with no odor and no mess. And
All right. So let's get going. He is joining us in a couple of minutes. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 17, 2025 Operations Management Budget and Government Accountability Committee meeting. I'm Councilman Amilcar Hernandez, and I am chair of this committee. This meeting is broadcasting live on HPA-TV Xfinity Government Channel 96, Frontier Channel 6032. It will also be streamed via hpa-tv.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and the HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV apps. It will also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. I would like to acknowledge everyone here today. I have here voting member Councilwoman Mali Rosado, voting member Councilman Josh Micton, voting member Councilman Alex Thomas, voting member Councilman John Gill, and voting member Assistant Majority Leader TJ Clark. And with us as well is our corporate counsel, Emily Holland. We have two items on the agenda. The first item, 2.1, Councilman Mali Rosado, Councilman John Gill, Councilman Josh Micton, resolution to the Hartford Court of Common Council for reviewing and amending handicap parking policies and meter charges in collaboration with the Hartford Parking Authority and disability rights organizations.
Councilman, I make a motion to postpone this item in committee.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made, properly second. Those in favor of postponing this item, say aye.
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 Okay, the ayes have it. This item will be postponed until our next committee meeting. Now to item 2.2, Councilman Micton, resolution supporting an adjustment of Connecticut fiscal guardrails. Councilman Micton, the floor is yours.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair. Basically, this is just, I assume many of you have heard of what the fiscal guardrails are because there's a lot of movement in this legislative session to change them. Basically, it's a set of spending rules that sort of forces the state government to hold a lot of money in reserve from the revenues it takes in, and also to devote a whole bunch of money to the state pension fund, which is a thing that needs money, but what's happened is that the state's investments over the last number of years have done very well. And so now the state is basically sitting on a huge amount of money, and it's actually devoting more money to the rainy day fund and the pension, shoring up the pension, than is fiscally necessary. And then it hurts most cities who, of course, we never get our full pilot funding. You've probably heard also relatedly how they're working on changing the special ed formula. In essence, the state has this very conservative way of saving money that was put in place at a different fiscal moment. And so now there's a large coalition of labor unions and other advocates for poor people, broadly speaking, who are just calling on the state to make this change in its budgeting. And I'm asking us as a city that could really benefit from it to do the same. I could get way more into the weeds, and I'm trying to resist that so that I don't put you all to sleep before dinner. But I will be, I guess I'll just take any questions that my colleagues have about this.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions, any comments?
I have a question. You indicated that the city could benefit, and I guess my question is, how do you see us as a council promoting your resolution as benefiting? And I guess that's really a two-part question, because one part is, right, we're now lobbying as a council for something, and is that going to benefit? Just the act of lobbying, is that going to benefit us at a time when we also have our hand out asking for a whole lot of money for, as you mentioned, special education? But I understand there's other things that are taking place, including funding a pilot for the MDC property that would generate some revenue for Hartford. And then the second question is, if they remove those guardrails, how do you know we benefit from that?
Both good questions. So I think the way to look at the guardrails is that they're sort of a level above all of the sort of the specific asks that we are making, right? Like we're asking for, we, along with all the other cities, are asking for, a change in the CES formula, a change in special ed funding, all of, and that's all being sort of argued and negotiated. But all of that is made more possible if the guardrails are modified, because it frees up money, right? So this is like a very big picture thing where we're saying we would be adding our voice to many, I think practically every labor union, certainly the big ones that have a lot of members in our city, like SEIU and 1199. Everyone's saying to make this modification, not get rid of the guardrails, but modify the limits on them and the definitions to free up more funds for all the things we're asking for. So in that sense, I don't think this is like another ask that we're saying, give us this and give us this and now give us another thing. It's us saying, do this structural change that will free up the money we're asking for. So I think that answers one question. And I think, well, maybe it answers both questions, right? Like we add our voice. It's another thing. I mean, I have given and will continue to give testimony saying that it should be done. I hope some of my colleagues will too. But to speak as a city that we want the state to prioritize the neediest and make a shift away from shoring up our bond rating and toward the more immediate needs, I think probably helps. Doesn't hurt. Low stakes investment.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I have to just say, I'm concerned that that the resolution would accomplish very little and would hurt more than it would help. And I went ahead and asked my state representative for some feedback, and it wasn't positive. So, I mean, these are the guys that we're kind of counting on to lobby, and their state representatives, their state senators, they should be out there legislating and negotiating with everyone else to try to bring some some additional equity back to Hartford. So if it's not seemingly helpful to them, then it doesn't seem like I should be supporting it. So I guess that's kind of my concern. And nothing you've said has changed that equation for me.
Well, before I respond to that, let me just see if the other colleagues who are here have any other questions. Then I'll say something broader.
No, any other questions? No?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate, the resolution. However, I'm just at this juncture of where things are with the state budget, and I think how things are very much in flux. I would have to agree with Councilman Gale that if council chooses to pass this type of resolution, it more than likely will not bode well with the House leadership and our state delegation as they are continuing to do the budget. And I'm just taking this as an example, and then Councilman Gale would understand where I'm coming from with this. As when we first got on council and we were considering a lot of things as to lobby the state for, we just really had to be cautious as to resolutions passed on what we're going to be asking the state for, because there's a lot of people at the state that feel that Hartford gets enough money as it is. And when it was at a time when we were asking the state for helping us with the fiscal stability of our finances. And so I think at this juncture, we just really need to be very cautious as to what we are sending out of this body, that the state capitol will take hold of and be looking at, because that could really tip the scale and not in the favor for the council. Sorry, for the city of Hartford.
Thank you, Councilman Clark. I will say, do you want to go ahead and make sure, or?
Well, if I could, and I'll ask for you, Mr. Chair, of my colleagues, would it be helpful to postpone this and have someone come who I think could maybe speak on it with a little more expertise than I can next time? Because I've been to presentations where the like economists have explained this much better than I can, and maybe also just to give some perspective on how many, like the broad coalition that's asking for this, rather than taking my word for it. I just asked my colleague through you if maybe it would make sense to postpone it, if there would be support for that, since I see there's not support to pass.
Well, I would say that. So when I saw this the first time, I was conflicted a little bit, because I see that there's a genuine, ask here that, to a certain level, it makes sense. If there's some flexibilities there, we may be able to have a bigger piece of the pie, or not just us, but any city, any town throughout the state. But at the same time, I need to understand the environment and the ecosystem where these conversations are happening, and where are we in these conversations at the state level. And I did something similar that Councilman Gale did, and I spoke to some of the leadership at the state and around to get more knowledge and understand this better. And I think that it's not necessarily the ask, the result here. It's more of the timing and more of how much this could be counterproductive during this time. So to me personally, it's not the ask. I believe I sympathize and I agree with the ask. I want to be careful that modifying the guardrails could be done in so many different ways, right? Some are arguing that it should be done only to get funding for education. Some are saying that it should be done for a lot of more other social issues, and some are saying no, we shouldn't do it at all. So there's different levels of that, and for me to make a statement that it should be flexible, it's more of a blanket general statement. I think it may be counterproductive at this time, especially where the conversations are right now, as I've been able to gather with my conversations with state leadership from the General Assembly. So I'm not sure that bringing somebody to explain the economics of this will change that part of it, because I don't think that's the issue on my end, at least. It's not the economy of it. It's more of the timing and how kind of productive it could be while these conversations are actually happening right now. And for us to kind of jump in the middle of that conversation with this statement, I'm not sure that it will be helpful. Councilwoman Rosado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, first of all, I agree with everything that both of my council colleagues said, Councilman Gale, Councilman Clark, and also our chair. But and I'm sorry if I'm asking this question and Councilman Gale already asked it. Did you, Councilman Mixtum, have a meeting with our state delegation?
I have not met with our whole state delegation. I have talked to some of the delegation about this issue, but not all of them.
I think that, that sometimes equals to success, for many years. The red light camera was something that, would never pass. And, when State Representative Sanchez got there, I was able to work with him and the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. And it did make things communication wise a lot easier for them to advocate for, issues that are concerning to Hartford. So I cannot support this resolution right now, unless you would have that type of conversation with the state delegation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Mixon.
I move to postpone.
Yeah, I'm not going to second that, because I was just going to say, in keeping with what the chair said, it just seems counterproductive. And it's just a weighing thing, like keeping this around, does that have a positive influence or a negative influence if it's kept on our agenda for another cycle versus disappears, and we don't have to worry that the legislators up there are hearing things are coming out of Hartford where we're asking for more than we're entitled to or whatever, to some of the points that were earlier made. So I'm not going to be your second.
Councilman Mixon.
I just want to make the case here that it is our job, this body's job, to advocate for the things that benefit the city, and that this notion that I hear, I respect what you all are saying. I respect the theory, the strategy of it, that if we ask for things, it looks like we're asking, which plays into what I think we would all agree is sort of a misconception about how much we get versus how much we give to the state and regional economy. But I want to urge you to think about it differently, which is that our role is to be advocates for us, for the city. I think we all agree that the city and other cities should get more state funding, because we give so much in terms of the things that we host without collecting taxes and the burden that it is to be a regional center. I don't think anyone thinks, even if we don't pass this resolution, that we don't want more resources for our city. So I think it's a better strategic approach simply to say, look, this city recognizes that this fiscal policy of the state is harmful to us and to other cities and to the working class. And so we would ask you politely to consider changing it. All of which is to say, let's, following on the chairman's statement, maybe it's the timing. Responding to Councilman Gale's point, if it's just on our agenda and we haven't taken a position on it, I would say it does neither harm nor good. It just sits there. But what it does is it gives us, one, time for things to evolve, time for me to talk to the delegation in its entirety, or any of you all. It just gives us a little flexibility. and we can always, vote it down next time, right? The legislative session runs through June, so we have that luxury. So that's just a pitch for a second, so we could postpone the thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, our delegation, our Hartford delegation, is actually having these conversations already. They are having these conversations. We won't be telling them something they already know. They are having these conversations. They are looking for more resources and fighting the good fight to bring more resources to Hartford. I'm not sure that there's any more to be said. Um,
Could I ask a question, if I may?
yeah, Councilman Thomas.
Councilman Mitchell, I even if you were like, if we were to get a second for this resolution, it would still need to be voted on to be postponed, right? Or is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, like, I don't know if that would happen. And so with that being said, like, could it maybe just make sense to like reach out to the economists and like maybe just set up a meeting and maybe even open to the public to where people can have this conversation, not just with us, or like if any council members wanted to attend that meeting, they can go, but also open up to the public so they can hear some conversations around this thought process as well.
Can I respond, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
yeah.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I would love to do that, but part of that is if we have that meeting, council members, the public learn more, and they do want us to call on our state delegation and on the whole legislature to do a thing. Well, this is the resolution to do it. So if we postpone it, we keep open that option. I'm just asking for a second here, folks. Well, I mean, I'm asking for a second and a majority vote to postpone, but you don't know what I mean.
Well, I mean, in lieu of not having a second for that motion, I'll ask my colleagues to see if they have another motion on the floor.
Well, let me just first respond to one of the comments made. I don't think there's anybody on this council who doesn't advocate on a 24/7 basis for all the residents of the city of Hartford. I think we all take this being on city council very seriously, and I think that we all in our own ways continuously advocate, and that's advocating at multiple levels, but including advocating at the state legislature in with the whatever connections we each individually have, and we all come to the table with a different set of connections, which is a great thing. We multiply our effect. So it's certainly my belief that we each are doing as much as we can to advocate for the best interests of our residents, but that doesn't mean that you adopt every single thing that you could possibly adopt. And I think this is just one of those things that we maybe shouldn't adopt. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if this is where you want to go on this, but I'd be happy to send this back to council, get it off of this agenda, but sending it back unfavorably.
Well, let the record show that the first motion didn't get a second, and now we're moving on to a motion by Councilman Gale to send this back with an unfavorable recommendation. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and properly second. Any comments? Okay.
There's a third way. Talk us out of it.
All right. Well, those in favor of sending this back with an unfavorable recommendation back to council, say aye.
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 All right, there's 5. Those against sending this back with an unfavorable recommendation.
Nay.
Okay, so the ayes have it. This committee will be sending this resolution back to council with an unfavorable recommendation, with a vote of 5-1. And seeing that there are no more items on the agenda, we will be ending this meeting at this point. Thank you all for coming up and having this healthy discussion. Thank you.
Good evening.